Well, good Shabbos and welcome. This is Valley Beth Shalom Torah study for a Shabbos morning or Shabbos afternoon. I'm Rabbi Ed Feinstein, joined joyfully this morning by our dear friends, Rabbi Sherre Hirsch, formerly of the American Jewish University, and Rabbi Marc Gellman of South Florida. Thank you both for being on. Sherre, welcome back. We missed you, and we're really delighted that you're back with us.
I missed you guys too. I'm so happy to be back.
Well, I have a very good Shabbos to everyone. This week, we reached the climactic point in the story of the Exodus from Egypt. Parshat Beshalach is the story that you get at the climax of the movie, at the climax of your Seder. We leave Egypt in the very first line, but we don't take the shortcut. We take the long way around through the Red Sea. And camping by the Red Sea, we stop and we have our first breath as free people. We were slaves, our parents were slaves, their parents were slaves, and their parents were slaves. And for the first time in generations, we take a breath as free people and begin to imagine that maybe this man Moses had it right. Maybe we can actually be free. When all of a sudden, we hear the hoofbeats of Pharaoh's chariots gaining on us from behind. And we cried out to Moses, why'd you bring us out here to die? Actually, the soliloquy is much better because when Jews get cynical, boy, do they get articulate. Were there not enough graves in Egypt that you brought us out here to die in the wilderness? And of course, Moses, and the most cinematic moment of the Bible, says, be quiet, stand back and watch. And he holds his arm above the sea, and the sea splits miraculously, and we cross between. It's a marvelous story. And then when we turn around, Pharaoh follows us into the sea. Moses holds his rod, and the sea comes back and drowns the Pharaoh and all of our enemies. And then at that moment, the people of Israel really know they're free, and they sing a song. And that song, Az Yashir Moshe V'nei Yisrael, that song of the sea, is the first self-conscious prayer of the collective Jewish people in thanksgiving for this remarkable miracle, this gift that has changed everything. And if you look at it from a bigger mythical context, in the Bible, water represents chaos. In the beginning, before God created a world, everything was covered with water. And on the second day of creation, God separates the waters, upper waters and lower waters, and creates a habitable world in the midst of the water. God creates cosmos, an ordered natural universe within the context of chaos, all of the mishmash, the tohu vavohu of creation. And that becomes our home, our natural home, a place where the rules of nature obtain, where you know what's going to happen. The sun will rise tomorrow morning. In this story, once again, we face water. And in this case, the water represents the chaos of history. And the chaos of history, of course, is slavery, totalitarian government, oppression, persecution, the destruction of human beings as precious creatures. And here again, God splits the water and creates a place in between. And that place is history. And now we know what the journey of history is. The journey of history is the journey from the house of bondage to the promised land. And history has its own order and its own progress and regress. And that's the symbolism of this story. And out of that comes a revolution. The Torah has a remarkable line. It says, Vayaminu ba'Adonayu b'Moshe avdo. They saw all this and they believed. They trusted God, they trusted Moses. This people is transformed. They who were slaves just yesterday are suddenly free people. And this moment is so important that we reproduce it twice a day in our daily prayers, in a big way on the Passover holiday. It's the seminal moment, the moment of turning in Jewish history, in Jewish faith, in Jewish culture. So let's begin with that idea. Sherre, in our culture, we have this beautiful mythic idea of love at first sight, the moment you fall in love. The question is, do people fall in faith? Do people change that radically out of one powerful moment?
So first of all, it's so nice to see you both. I missed you so much. And I love that question, Eddie, because of course there are people that say they have a radical moment that turns them 180 degrees, in which when they used to say, I don't believe, they now say, I believe, right? But I don't think that's for most people the experience. I think the real experience that we see in Beshalach is we have moments where we can feel the chaos in our lives, right? And then something happens and we see a new pathway to a new order. And that's the moment when that spark of faith is reignited in us, right? At that moment of chaos, we're in despair. Oh my God, I've lost hope. It's totally chaotic. I don't know what we can do. The Israelites were like, we're going to be in more graves in Egypt than ever before. That moment when we see that order is in front of us is what reignites faith. And I think that's also the challenge for us, is to trust that little flame or spark of order that's in front of us and pursue it like they pursued the dry land between the waters, so that you can get to another place of order. But then the irony is, right, the wilderness then becomes another place of chaos. And so our life is a series of chaos, see order, pursue it, maybe to have another set of chaos, to pursue order, to find faith, and to go forward again.
So let me pursue this. So how do I prepare myself? How do I get ready? How do I open myself to those kind of moments? I can close myself to those moments. Last week, we spent a lot of time talking about the hardening of a heart. I can certainly close myself and become bitter.
Well, I
How
think
do you
that's the
stay
danger.
open to that?
I think the danger is in the midst of the chaos is when you close, right? That is Pharaoh hardening his heart. The harder it is, the more we go insular and say, there is no order. This is how it's going to be. This is finite. This is what's going to happen to me. And I think is to be able to look and see literally sparks of places of light where you're like, I wasn't expecting that, but maybe if I pursue it, it will open some new pathway. But you have to be open to keeping your eyes open. And I think a lot of people close their eyes, metaphorically.
Marc, you've been a teacher of religion for a very long time, and an extraordinary one. Do people gain faith in one powerful moment, or is it a growing process within us? Is it possible to gain faith in one moment?
No, I don't think so.
Never?
I think what happens is it's possible for people who are predisposed to being faithful, to being religious, to having belief that we are not alone, that there's a higher power. People who are predisposed to that in a sort of inchoate way can have an experience which solidifies their faith. There are other people who believe we're just material beings and there is no God and there's nothing. They aren't predisposed to anything transcendent. I think it's not that they've been closed to faith, they never were open to it. And so if you say those innate secularists, those innate cynics about the world, the innate materialists, I don't think they can have a moment where all of a sudden they say, oh my God, what possibly could have blinded me to the fact that I am accompanied in this journey, that I am not alone in this journey. So Piaget thought that by age 4, sometimes he revises later in his life to age 2, we're either trusting or not trusting of the world. So there was a sort of basic inclination that people have. I've seen that, we've all seen that in our students. I've seen it among twins, where they have the same genetic everything, but one of them is open, loving, and available to the spiritual world, and the other one is not. So I think people have a certain gift that they're given at birth or as the result of nurture and nature interacting however they do. And I think that's what happens. But what fascinates me in this is that there's really two kinds of faith that are described in the most innocuous verse in the whole Torah, perhaps. Two verses that say exactly the same thing, but in different order, and I see a whole big meaning in it. What you have in verse 14:22 is that a simple statement. The sea split, and the Jews walked through the sea, b'toch hayam b'yavasha, b'toch hayam b'yavasha, in the midst of the sea on dry land. Okay, fine. And then in verse 14:29, just a couple verses later, we have the same thing, the split the sea, and then, but it says v'yavasha, the Jews walked v'yavasha b'toch hayam. In other words, on dry land they walked through the sea. The first says they walked through the sea on dry land. The second is on dry land they walked through the sea. So who cares? What's the difference there? But to me, it's everything. The first is the one that says b'toch hayam v'yavasha. That's real faith. That's the faith of the most famous rabbinic story I've ever heard. Every rabbi gets this when they get ordained, I think. Someone tells them the story and they say, go there, here's a little rabbi's book, and here's a story. And the story they give them is the Nachshon story. Every young rabbi I mentor is told the Nachshon story. It's the first one we ever learned, which is that Nachshon ben Aminadab walks into the sea, up to his knees, up to his pupik, up to his mouth, his nose, and then only when he's basically drowning in the sea does God split the sea. That's Nachshon. That's faith. It's seeing what is invisible to the eye. It's trusting what you have no reason to trust. It's why Abraham left Haran and came to Canaan, and it's why people have an openness to faith. The second type of faith is not a Nachshon faith. It's the shore Jews' faith. It's the faith of those Jews who were sitting on the shore. And that is the Yavasha b'toch hayam. They waited for the dry land to appear first. And then they said, oh, okay, there's dry land and we're being chased by the Pharaoh, let's go forward. So they waited for evidence before they had faith. And that is not faith. That is a transactional agreement that you make with God in which you say, God, hello, it's me. And I want you to know I'm prepared to sign you up to be my God, but I want to see something first. And if you do this, then, that's what transactional relations are. And I think that is not true faith. And in the end, it is only the faith of the Nachshon Jews among us that carry us forward. And that's why I think Vayaminu Baronai, for the only time in the whole Torah, we read what the goal of the whole Torah was, that was achieved for a moment. It was achieved for a moment. They believed in God. And they believed in God because they were led by people who walked into the sea, and then the dry land appeared.
That's a beautiful drasha. That's a wonderful drasha. So Sherre, Marc has given us two models. And it's not just models of faith, it's actually two models of how you approach life, right?
Yeah, right.
There are those of us who jump in to the chaos of the world and hope that we can somehow make something of it, even though we're not assured it's going to happen. And then there are those of us who wait for the thing to get organized and to have certainty about it, and we gather evidence, and we're ready. And now we're ready to. The risk is gone because we've really waited for the moment when the risk is receded, and now we can jump in.
Well, also that second category, they waited to watch other people do it to assure them that it's safe.
So I was going to ask you, so in our experience working with families, working with folks, you ever marry people like this? You ever talk to people like this who are having kids You ever talk to people? I mean, how many different applications of this wonderful idea are there?
It's so crazy because it really is like there are two different archetypes in the world. There's like the
Yes.
people that jump in with both feet and are like, it'll work out. And then there's the people that watch the people jump in, watch them work it out, and then say, I'm all in. And I used to have judgment about it because it was, I think, a lower self. Now I feel like both are integral to making order in the world. Now I feel like both are essential because there are the people that jump in and they're needed to carve new inroads, to create disruption, to be sort of innovative, right? And then I think there's the people that are to carry out that vision and to follow and to increase it and to grow it. And so now I have like tremendous respect for both. But I remember when I was younger, I just have to share the story. It's crazy, but a motorcyclist crashed in front of me, like on the sidewalk. And before I could think, I was like literally at his side, ripping open his shirt, not because, but to make sure he was breathing and, you know, calling for the police and getting him help. And there was all these people there was also a couple people that jumped in with me, right? And we were like working together and it wasn't like clear if we were doctors or not. So there was like 3 of us. And then there was another like 25 people on the side streets watching. And there was no sort of organization of who jumps in and who doesn't. It was really personality driven. And it wasn't like one was better than the other. It was just very curious to me because it happened almost as a reflex for me. And I realized I was standing next to my mother-in-law, who is very much a watcher. And her reflex was to stand still. And we talked about it after, and it wasn't that one was wrong or right, but she was like, it is not my place to go in there. Who knows? And it was so fascinating because I didn't even check with her. And it really sort of showed me in a moment how there's just different archetypes of people in the world and how they respond. And I don't think you get to choose your archetype. I think it's chosen for you.
I think so. One of my favorite midrashim is that to this point, the rabbi said, how is it possible that they were fetching at the other side of the Red Sea? They didn't see the miracle of the Red Sea. They didn't see the plagues and all of these. This generation saw all the miracles. And yet at the end, there's no garlic, there's no quail, there's no food. And they start fetching. So the answer, how is this possible? They say, well, many of the people didn't see the miracle because they never looked up. So all they ever saw was mud because they were always looking down. And to me, when I talk to young rabbis and when I think about my own work, I think, that's what we do. That's really, in one sentence, what we do. We just say this. Look up. Just look up. Look up. Because if you don't look up, it's fine. It's your choice. But if you don't look up, all you're going to see is mud. And if you can live in a world of mud, fine. God bless you. But I think it's better to look up and believe that you're being led through the sea, that it's a miracle that you're going through the sea, that it's a miracle you wake up and breathe. And that, I think, is part of this Nachshon faith versus the Shore Jews faith.
Yeah, I don't think it's quite personality driven,
No.
as you've said. I think that really there are moments in life that call upon both.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know if I would call it transactional, but I think that the Nachshon moment, the Toch Hayam B'Yabasha moment, is a moment of tremendous risk, but it has tremendous rewards. And it's the creative moment. It's entering something I don't know how it's going to end. I just have a need to engage this. And the other is a calculated moment where I calculate the risks and the pluses and minuses, the benefits. Before I buy a refrigerator, I check Consumer Reports to see how reliable the brand is. But when a couple comes to get married, and the young man will say to me, but how do I know this is going to work? And I say, you don't, kid, you jump in, because frankly, right, it is a huge risk. You're both so cute. You're sitting here in front of me and you're adorable. But as the great Rabbi Paul McCartney once asked, will you still need me? Will you still feed me when I'm 64? You enter into a deep relationship with a commitment to continue to grow and discover levels of love and levels of affection and levels of connection. Same thing with children. If you wait for guarantees and warranties before you have a kid, you'll never have kids. Having kids is the craziest, riskiest thing you'll ever do. And if you don't just jump in, I'm not saying you should be irresponsible about it. Should be it takes a lot of resources, personal and material and every other kind of resource to raise a child. And you should make sure those resources are ready. But there's always this next step of, well, how do I know it's the right thing? If it's time, it's time. You got to jump in.
I would actually say sometimes it's not actually, Eddie, how do I know that's the thing. It's not how do I know it's the next right thing. It just is. And you have to go forward or you're stuck. Does that make sense? So I think it's telling that you say that, because if you want to go forward in your life, sometimes you just have to go.
And here you have slaves. Now, of course, one of the wonderful midrashic traditions is it says in the Torah that they came out of Egypt chamushim. And no one knows exactly what that word means. But one of the midrashim on that word is from the word chamesh, meaning only 1 in 5 Jews came out. Yeah. The other 80% said, how do we know it's going to work? How do we know we can be free? How do we know we're going to get away? And those are the sort of really calculating ones, the scared ones. And the ones who came out were the ones who said, I don't know what's on the other side, but I'm going to take a step into the water because I know that where I come from is horrifying. And the only chance for a better life is over there. And that's what life calls upon us to do, this all the time. And the other side of the river, the other side of the sea, Vayaminu b'Adonai v'meshavdo, you get a moment of assurance, a moment of confidence, a moment of faith. And then you take 3 steps into the desert and you start doubting all over again. And that's sort of, Sherry's right, that's sort of the journey of life, isn't it?
Yeah. Look, and the other thing is we have these moments that you can't predict when they're going to occur. I had the most important moment, other than marrying Betty and the birth of our children, was meeting Tom Hartman. And the day I met him, Passover and Easter were on the same day, and we had a wonderful thing on the local cable news thing, and we just met each other, and I'm saying goodbye to him, and I said, look, I won't ever see you again because I have an offer from a big synagogue in Miami, and go there, and it's just a no-brainer. And he says, you're not going to Miami? And I said, really? Why is that? He said, because I had a dream, and in the dream, God came to me and said, you're going to meet someone tomorrow, and when you see him, tell him I'm not through with you here. I'm not through with you here. That's what he said to me. Now, a normal person, which I freely admit I am not, a normal person would say, thank you very much, nice meeting you, goodbye. I called right there in the parking lot. I called Miami. I said, I'm not coming to be your rabbi. And they said, why? I said, because an angel came to me and said, God's not through with me here. And they said, well, look, Rabbi Gellman, we're very happy you're not coming because you need psychiatric care. I said, yeah, I think I probably do. But there it was. It was no question about it. I was jumping into the sea with Tom Hartman with no idea that the God Squad was on the other side, that all that we did was on the other side. No idea. But I believed, and eventually I was able to see what I believed.
And the question is, for everyone who's listening, is what are those nachshon moments?
Yes.
What are the moments in your life when you have, what are those moments in your life when those moments in your life when something came to you and turned you, and you took that jump? And then there's a beautiful Jewish idea of beshert. You look back at where you came from and said, it was intended. But at the moment, it's scary as heck. And that's the only way to move forward in your life. Sherre, go ahead.
And on the
Please.
times that you don't move forward because you can't, or it's scary, or you're frustrated, not to beat yourself up for that, but to use those times that you did move forward as encouraging you for the next time, right? I
Right.
just think we're also not built to just constantly take risk. It's like sometimes that's just really hard and we just need a little bit of respite. And sometimes we need to forgive ourselves for that too.
That's a wonderful way to think about this. That's a wonderful way. And there's one last midrash that I cherish about this Torah portion. I've taught this many, many times. There is a midrash in the Talmud where one of the rabbis asks what's a very obvious question about the verse that Marc cited. It says in the Torah, "Vayaminu b'Adonai b'moshavdo," they believed. And the rabbi says, oh, of course they believed. They just saw the sea split. And before that, they saw 10 plagues. Like, anybody who had seen that would have believed. And the answer, one of the answers in the tradition is very beautiful. It says, no. Who are these people? They were slaves. They saw their children thrown into the Nile. They saw their elders crushed under Pharaoh's projects. They saw a level of degradation that would have left any normal human being cynical and bitter and cold. And these people were willing to take a step forward. And the Midrash concludes by saying that their willingness to take a step forward into the sea, into the possibilities of freedom, into a future that was not assured, into a place they'd never been, that is a bigger miracle than the splitting of the sea. That's a bigger miracle. Finding that inner resource, that courage to say, I don't know what's on the other side, but I know where I'm coming from, and I know what I need in my life, and I'm going to take that risk. And so there's a great deal of reverence for that kind of courage that is adduced at that particular moment. Now, this is the point in the Seder where we sing Dayenu. After you've told the story of the Red Sea, it's Dayenu for all the miracles, because each one of those miracles in some way contains one of these moments of stepping forward into the unknown. So why don't we do a little pre-Pesach getting ready? I know it's just not
Early.
It's Tu B'Shvat, right. But, a couple of months from now, we're going to be cleaning the kitchen and baking the matzah brai. So tell me your Dayenu, Sherre, and tell me your Dayenu, Marc.
But I want Marc to go first because I'm not ready. I'm not sure what my Dayenu
Marc
moment
has to unmute so we can hear him in the vacuum cleaner behind him, right?
Yes. So my Dayenu is that you guys are in my life. That's my Dayenu. Because when you're retired, there is an impulse to sort of crawl into a shell and disappear. But both of you, in important ways that I can never thank you enough for, have got me out of my shell when I was in LA with the kids after I retired for 6 years, and got me back into a community where I felt it was a community of learning and a community of love and friendships. These were things that I didn't have when I retired because I was Rabbi Gellman. And I had friends, of course, but they were all in the East and I left them all. And so I say Dayenu to you, who at the moment when I was going through the sea of Tom Hartman's death and my retirement, were calling to me and saying, hey, Gellman, come on. We got stuff for you to do on the other side.
Thanks, Marc. Thank you. Sherre?
Thank you.
I think it's too early for me to think about it. I just made a big, huge professional transition and took a big risk. And I'm not exactly sure how I could answer it right now because I see something in front of me that is waiting for me. And it was a very big act of courage, but I'm so in the middle of it right now, it's hard for me to actually name it.
So I'll hark back to something Sherre said before. my brothers and I have 3 younger brothers, and we used to sing through the Dayenu, and my brothers have a very, very sick sense of humor. So they would look for all of the goofy things in their liturgy. And there's a line in Dayenu that used to make us crack up. And the line is, Ilu hevianu lahar Sinai v'lo natan lanu et Torah. If you'd brought us to Mount Sinai and not given us the Torah, Dayenu. So my brother Simi would say, oh, that'd have been great. We would have shown up and said, okay, what's supposed to happen here? Is there something happening here? You have to put a quarter in something and something's supposed to happen? And we used to laugh at this. And then a couple of years ago, I was reading a Haggadah from a Hasidic community, and I found a commentary on that line. And there was this wonderful, wonderful rabbi who came up with a wonderful insight that Sherre articulated for us a moment ago. And he said to us, he says, that we came to Mount Sinai ready, prepared, open to hear God's word. And that's the miracle.
Right.
That's the miracle, that we weren't bitter from the experience of slavery. We weren't in a hurry to get across the desert to the promised land. We weren't with our eyes facing down, as Marc said, as slaves always do. We weren't distracted. We actually showed up open and ready for life to give us the gift of enlightenment, of inspiration, of insight, of wisdom, of joy. We were ready to accept it. And that, he said, that is a profound miracle. So I live a very distracted life, got lots of things going on. And the few moments that I can sort of slow down and pay attention and actually learn something and find friends and find joy, those moments really matter. So thank you for crossing the Red Sea with me today. It's wonderful to have Rabbi Hirsch back with us, and Rabbi Gellman, wonderful to have you and your vacuum cleaner. And so we want to wish everyone a very, very good Shabbos. Valley Beshalom on Saturday morning at 10 o'clock right here on YouTube, rather, and you can enjoy us. And wherever you are, cross the Red Sea with confidence and faith and find a gift on the other side. Have a good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.